Moderating, we've got EgoPo's artistic director, Lane Savadove. We have Fred Abrahamse of Abrahamse and Meyer in South Africa, Maria Sulistyani of Papermoon Puppet Theatre in Indonesia, and Peter Clerke of The Occasion in Scotland.
Thank you, Dane. So I'm going to act as sort of moderator and a little bit of a representative from the United States, though most of our listeners know more about what's occurring here, though it'll help sort of contextualize. The reason I wanted to do this was that the world can feel very small in quarantine, and yet we're probably experiencing the most radical global experience that's ever happened in the history of mankind. And so I thought it was really essential to have a sense of how this is playing itself out globally, particularly within our art form. And there's a lot of conversations happening internally within the theater world, domestically, locally, and yet audiences don't have access to that. Artists, independent theater artists, less have access to that. And so I wanted also a chance just to allow an inside look at some of these conversations as they occur. So I'm going to start with the first question, which for each of you, please introduce yourself and just let us know exactly where you are right now and what you're experiencing in a couple of minutes. So Ria, we'll start with you.
Oh, me? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Lane, for having me joining this amazing, group of awesome people. So, hello, guys. My name is Ria. You can see my name over there, Maria Tri Sulistyani, but you can call me Ria. And I am the founder and co-artistic director of Papermoon Puppet Theatre, which is based in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Right now, I'm staying in my house in Yogyakarta. And well, what Papermoon does, we are making lots of productions since 2006. I found Papermoon in 2006, and we do lots of performances, workshop, making and initiating International Biennale Puppet Festival since 2008. And actually, we also do lots of international collaboration. And one of the project will be with EgoPo.
Yeah, so Papermoon and EgoPo are collaborating, have been collaborating on a long-term project, a couple years in the making. It's a surprise what that will be, but that's how we know it. Great, and I'll double back and so let's do intro and the work that you do, and then we'll double back and just hear about how COVID is affecting. So Peter, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Peter Clerke. I'm based in Glasgow. I've been a theatre director for about 40 years. Currently, everything's sort of stopped. I came across Lane, I met briefly when I was working with Melanie Stewart Dance in Philadelphia, with whom I did a number of projects, the most recent about 10 years ago, which was Jekyll and Hyde at Rowan University. And it's great to be here. Thank you very much, Lane, for inviting me.
Thanks, Peter. Fred.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for having me, Lane. I'm representing Abrahamse and Meyer Productions, which is a independent theatre company, one of the few in our country, and our major focus is on keeping classical theatre alive. So we do a lot of the old classics, the Shakespeares. We do a lot of what we consider contemporary classics, Tennessee Williams, Eugene O'Neill. And we focus a lot on young people in terms of our Shakespeares, which are taught in the graduate school. So we mount productions and play to them. We've got a youth festival, which has been going for about 20 years. And we've played to over sort of 400,000 learners, kids, and we've established a trust and a fund, and we raise money for charity with that children's program. And yeah, we started, our first international collaboration was in 2012 with the Tennessee Williams Festival in America. And subsequently, we've toured to Europe and America. We've been to Philadelphia under Lane's company. And yeah, everything's pretty much ground to a halt.
Yeah, and for those of you who know, we presented Desire Under the Elms from Fred and Marcel's company to launch the South African season. Talk a little bit about what your practicalities of your work look like. Like, were you touring? How many shows a year? Just what did life normally look like before COVID-19 came into our lives? And now, practically speaking, what does it look like now? And it's okay, like what Fred was telling us about cigarettes and alcohol in South Africa, that's interesting to us. It's okay to be personal about it as well. So both professionally and personally, how is your life just currently altered? What were you doing before? What's it look like now? And I'll let you guys decide the order that you want to go.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, all our work is pretty well on hold. I'm co-artistic director with a company called The Occasion. At the end of last year, we just completed a UK tour of The Monster and Mary Shelley, which was about Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, and it went really well. We were beginning to look at possibilities for touring within Europe and Australia, so that just stopped. We were also investigating a tour for Boris Vian's The Empire Builders, which stopped. And we had a various number of workshop programs running, which similarly all just ground to a halt. So yeah, it's time is now spent on writing applications, on Zoom conversations, and learning how to edit video, seeing as everything seems to be going online. So yeah, it's a strange set of circumstances. Unprecedented, as somebody might have said once.
Peter, what were the logistics of stopping? Did the presenters, is it just your contracts canceled and that's that? Just what's the logistics of the pay between presenters?
It didn't affect us directly because we didn't have any tours going. With companies that were playing, I mean, the runs just stopped. You know, they stopped overnight in every theatre in the UK. I'm not so clear about what Arts Council of England have done. Creative Scotland have kind of like honoured any contracts, and they've said, you know, if you can reschedule the work in the future, then do that. That'd be good. But if you can't honour the contract, pay your freelance artists, and they're not going to ask for any money back. So I mean that side of it has been pretty reasonable. And I think generally people have tried to be very supportive. Creative Scotland and Arts Council of England have come up with schemes, or hardship schemes, with various regulations and requirements on them. But they've been okay. It's just a matter of like nobody knows, you know, like the touring fund that we were about to apply to. Initially they said they were going to keep the applications open, and then about a week later, which is very predictable, they said no, everything's been suspended. So there's no announcement of when that's going to be reopened. So you can't book a tour. You can't continue with that. Nobody knows how it's going to go. Plus the fact you've got a lot of receiving houses in Scotland, certainly, are also producing houses, and they're going to have a big backlog of work that they had planned, which presumably is going to take precedence over incoming work, independent touring.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. I know, Ria, you've had contracts touring all over the world. So what has this looked like for you?
Crazy. So we're supposed to have 3 big collaborative work this year. We're supposed to do tour to Netherlands. We're supposed to do tour to New York City. We're supposed to do tour in Taiwan, Japan, Malaysia, Australia. And that's run for a year, basically. So
in New York was Lincoln Center, right?
Yes, it will be in Lincoln Center. Some of the project will be kind of like postponed to mostly next year. So it will be, if next year will be normal, that will be another crazy year, because then, you know, you squish all the works to next year, which is like impossible. So we'll see. But then, yeah, there are a couple of like projects that, because some of our project, it's kind of like not really commission, but we prepared for a project for months, right? So some of the puppet building, it has been done since December. It's supposed to be transported to Netherlands on March, but then everything happened, and then we just couldn't move. The project won't start. But at least now we have puppets, like giant one in our studio, like waiting for another projects to come. Because for that festival, it will be definitely canceled, and it won't be, you know, moved to next year. So what happened this time? Where actually it's very interesting because it's crazy, but the artistic process was just like, you know, we have lots of time. Suddenly, none of our calendars have colors. So it is actually the time to stop, think, and making new concepts and brainstorming in this kind of situation. So in the beginning of April, for 18 days, I've been with Papermoon initiating in this time. It's a series of talk with puppetry artists around the world. So I interviewed 18 artists from around the globe, basically, through our Instagram live. And it's kind of like this kind of conversation, like, how are you guys, what actually makes you interesting in puppetry, you know, all this you know, like mind inside their artistic life. So I found this is quite, it's becomes weird because this medium is really, you know, I'd love to meet you again, Lane, talking about Ramayana as soon as possible physically, rather than having this kind of screen conversation. But in the other hand, I found that this is actually extended the audiences. You know, like for now, I met Fred from, I'm meeting you, Fred, from, you know, Cape Town, and then Peter from Glasgow. So it's kind of like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, though.
It is amazing to think that whenever we're doing our virtual work, that people could easily just log on from anywhere in the world and watch.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you able to get your workshop staff together? Are you able to keep building puppets and developing work? And are you developing, besides the virtual work you're doing, are you thinking at all a year down the road and developing live work?
This is what I found very interesting, because in meantime, we couldn't think further than few months ahead. Very weird situation, because we never know. Like, we plan to meet again on July or June, right? And then we don't know, because the airport will be closed until the 1st of June, for example, in the city. So nothing is clear in front of me. I don't know about the festival in October. Will we run it or not? But now we are thinking about what we will do next week. Like, what kind of talk, what kind of video tutorial that we'd love to upload on YouTube, how we will do this virtual performance, you know, like, which is very intimate. Now we are actually processing one of this project called Storyteller, that we will invite our people, everyone, audiences. We say that you can buy your theme, you ask us to make a performance for you, and we will send it through your WhatsApp. So those kind of, you know, experiment. So we definitely can think about, okay, if, like, for example, there will be a project ahead after that, like a year after this, we kind of like starting working on it. But it's hard because, you know, none of the contract are actually really sure for next year as well.
Right.
Like, we couldn't get the money for this month, right? So we definitely have to think it like day by day for this time. So I found this is like, whoa, it feels like we are in the very beginning of our career, you know?
Right, where you were really going like, oh, what do I want to do this week? What could be effective this week? Absolutely.
Exactly. We just do that. We don't know what will happen. Will there some money or not? We don't know. So
yeah, and you don't make work for the money. You're like, well, let's just make
exactly.
work, and maybe that'll generate money. I don't know.
Exactly.
The custom ordered puppet shows is really interesting. For those of you who are interested, go on to Ria's Facebook and website. They have a fabulous website. Papermoon Puppet.
Puppet.com.
Okay. And check that out and order one if you want. Fred, I know you too you have a really complex matrix of bookings around the world in any given year. So what was your professional life looking like beforehand, and what's it look like now?
Okay, well, first off, we're a two-man company. We only work with ad hoc actors. We contract them per performance. Obviously, we have a pool of actors that we've worked with many times. we kind of learned from the musical, the producers, don't put your own money in the show. So we being a two-man operation, we produce with festivals, with other theaters, with our equivalent of the National Theatre, and on that basis we create work and take it around. And I think our company is known for its economy of production. We work a lot with puppets and masks. So for instance, our Hamlet is performed by 6 male actors playing all the parts. Our Richard III is performed the entire play with 3 actors doing all the parts, working with masks and puppets. And so, yeah, we don't have a company on contract that we have to keep in salary. Obviously, we had a lot of work lined up, so the actors themselves can apply to the government fund for loss of work. But we were going to do Hamlet for the schools. Our production of The Tempest for the International Shakespeare Festival in Romania has been postponed. That was halfway through its rehearsal process. Our children's festival this year would have been the 20th year. So our big production this year was Aladdin, and that has been cancelled. We might do storytale reading with actors once the restrictions change and we can get actors into a studio, just to keep the offer alive on the website. We were going to do Clothes for a Summer Hotel. The Tennessee Williams play, we do an annual Tennessee Williams play in the form of the hotel plays, all the smaller plays, and we do it as a dinner theater. So people come and have a cocktail on arrival, they watch the first act, have starters and dinner and throughout the evening. And that's been going for a few years at a very, very prestigious hotel that is known for its fine wine and its wine-paired meals. So that's been postponed. And then the highlight over here is we were off to Denmark, to Elsinore Castle, to perform our production of Hamlet. And that was going to be a real big highlight for us in August. So that again has been postponed. Most of the festivals are annual or biannual, so they've all kind of going to do 2 festivals in a row. They'll do a 2021 and a 2022. So work has been postponed more than just outright cancelled. So yeah, we average between 6 and 8 runs of productions a year, so we haven't stopped. So on a personal level, Marcel and I are kind of like, we can breathe. So we've taken...
And nobody needs to breathe more than you and Marcel, I have to say.
Yeah, so it's, as Pierre said, it's been a great time to just like relax and reevaluate where we're going, what we're doing. We do a lot of the manufacture ourselves. So in this apartment, we make a lot of our masks. I just went and got one off the wall, and you can see this is Sycorax from The Tempest, our production of The Tempest. So we'll continue to make our puppets and work at home. We are looking at ways of picking up the rehearsals in terms of Zoom rehearsals and keeping the cast on their toes. We've got some big projects lined up, so we're going to do virtual auditions. And a theme of our work is that we normally, a few months before the production, we do a boot camp week where we sit around a table and we bash out the script and the characters, and we work very openly with the company. You know, on something like Tempest, where we deal with slavery and colonialism, and there we kind of got to some kind of pretty intense areas. So we will carry on with doing those kind of boot camp things, which we can do on Zoom. We can, the actors can sit, we can do table reads, we can do discussions, we can put up shared images and things like that. So it's been a necessary break. It's obviously devastating for the freelance and the independent companies. There are avenues to apply for funding due to postponement or cancellation. So yeah, South Africa is under very good leadership, and I think our president has put this imposed lockdown: no alcohol, no cigarettes, no traveling, no exercise. The only reason you can leave home is to go shopping for essentials. If you are an essential worker or to go to a pharmacy and you encounter roadblocks with military and they ask for your ID, you have to travel with proof of address, or a doctor's prescription or a letter, or you just wave a whole lot of shopping bags and say, I'm going shopping. And yeah, so it's working. It's cut down a lot in helping to flatten the curve. Our big concern, obviously, is being a third world country, is the poorer communities. So there's been an enormous drive to feed the poorer people. Theatre companies are doing kind of social distancing videos and things. A lot of those poorer communities don't have access to the internet and to all the facilities that we do. So it's a kind of very hands-on thing. We've been going through all our old fabrics and manufacturing cloth masks for frontline workers. We've made about 200. So the country's pulling together from sort of industry to individuals. There's feeding schemes. All our suburbs and in our cities have called CAN groups, which means we can do something. And whether it's just putting $100 into a fund to feed children, or like we're trying to do make masks, deliver things. So it's had an incredible influence on the way our society has reacted. Obviously, there's flare-ups, which are kind of racist, or, you know, somebody posts a picture of a chocolate cake they baked on Facebook and everybody tears them apart. How can you be so, you're privileged, at least you have eggs and flour. Besides that, the general tone is a very interesting experience. And I think we're going to emerge out of this a completely and utterly different society. And again, I just reiterate the strength of our leadership and the way that man goes on national television regularly and addresses us, the public, and incredibly strict in terms of the laws. People have been arrested for going out and just, you know, socializing or going for a walk. People have been arrested and are going to be tried for posting fake news. There's a big thing that he's issued about causing sensationalism. Retail outlets that hike their prices face criminal charges. So he's really clamped down very, very severely, but it has had a tremendous effect. And yeah, it's going to be different. And what we're looking at is how is theatre, which always reflects the society we live in, how is that going to change? And it's...
I'm gonna pin that question, Fred, because that's a great one, and we'll all return to that for the second half of this. I want to follow some of your threads because they're really interesting threads. I think it's just interesting to hear, how do you feel about, you know, Peter and Ria, how do you feel about just what your country or city, depending on just how you want to think about it, is doing during this period? You know, what, just hardcore practically, what's it look like to live there, and yeah, and what's your judgment about that?
Well, in Glasgow, it's the situation. I don't know how much people know about Scotland's devolved administration. So it's got control over some things, and the Scottish government basically has got its own say on policy to do with coronavirus. However, it's still controlled from the UK government, which is quite a different composition. The UK government seem to have taken a number of different policies. Initially, they said, we'll test and we'll track and we'll trace. And then it got to a point where they said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And Boris Johnson started talking about herd immunity. And that policy ran for about a week. And then they said, no, 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 we can't do that anymore. Too many people are going to die. So then we're going to put people under lockdown, which has happened fairly successfully, I think. A lot of problems with getting PPE. But the major thing is, the major difference in Scotland and Wales, which is another devolved administration as opposed to England or the UK government. Scotland and Wales are both starting to talk about exit strategies from it. The UK government say they won't talk about exit strategies at the moment. Now, whether that's because they haven't got one or they're playing sort of a waiting game to see what countries like Denmark come out with when they start easing things off. But I think the mood overall in Britain, I think it's been pretty concentrated, pretty concerted. Like Fred said, I think the sense of community has been pretty strong. I think there's signs that's beginning to shift, because you can only live in a lockdown for so long and with a hope that something is going to change and some idea of when it's going to change. Like there's no specification about when schools are going to go back, like I think Fred was saying in South Africa, and certainly Denmark and Germany are all talking about sending children back to school, or they've gone back to school. But no, there's nothing about that. And I think it's very important that people have some sort of sense of way forward, of a light. Otherwise, I think the mood might change.
Thank you, Peter. That was really clear. I appreciate that. Ria, Jogja, Java, Indonesia, whatever context you choose.
Well, I couldn't say about Indonesia because, you know, there's too big, like so many, too many islands to count. But I can just say for Jogja itself, because I live in the city, and then I found that the social, like public initiative is really, really important in our society rather than a big control from the government. So I can say like every week, for example, every weekend, like several people are actually spraying the disinfectant through the streets or the houses, and it's arranged by the community in the you know, housing area basically. So those are situations like I saw that lots of my friends, they started to open a donation for making a kitchen together, for, you know, delivering foods for those that couldn't eat, or they lost, of course, because most of our, you know, what do you call it, people who lives in Indonesia, we are doing really personal, like, you know, individual work. So it's not really hang on the government situation in this thing. Art doesn't have grants from like regular grants, like you say, maybe Fred asking, oh yeah, you can apply for funding from the government to get help. So in this situation, it's kind of like, is there any or not? Is there, you know, like, it's not really, you know, clear actually. Yeah. So yeah, so I saw that lots of my friends, they open a boutique, you know, like making clothes for wedding and everything. Now they moved to make the clothes for the doctor and nurse, because we found that in Indonesia we're lacking for that kind of suits, for that spatial suits, and also for the mask, the fabric mask. Lots of people are starting to make and then helping each other, and maybe some of them trying to, you know, sell it or surviving. And I found also lots of my friends are doing pivot step from being an artist to cooking and selling their foods. And the thing are actually the other friends are helping by buying those stuff, you know, like we kind of like trying to hold to each other, like, okay, we can do this together. We support each other. So I think that is what happened this time, especially in Jogja.
Thank you, Ria. Yeah, a little bit of just, you know, to keep EgoPo also part of this thread of the 4 countries that we're talking about, and some of our audience members don't know that. So we were in rehearsal for the 3rd show of our 3-show season, devoted to Sam Shepard, and Curse of the Starving Class was our last show, and we were in our second week, starting our 2nd week of rehearsal, the set fully built and in the space, the costumes already existing, and when the rumors started happening on Tuesday that things could change in terms of the ability to perform, I don't think anybody was thinking quarantine at that moment. Things changed so rapidly over a course of a few days. And we decided around Wednesday or Thursday of the 2nd week of rehearsal that we would really dive in and try to get the play fully staged and do a full run of the show on the set before we went into quarantine. And the actors were incredible and just went to a level of sort of line memorization and just, we were really in a drive of rehearsal. and just pretend it wasn't going to happen, and just kept getting it done. And so, and it's a big play. By Sunday, we were able to keep on schedule, and we were supposed to do a run for our design team. And we did a fully staged run of it, knowing that the moment we finished that run, we would all drink some beers. I think Dane got us all a case of Corona, in deference to the virus. And we all toasted with bottles of Corona, and then put the play on ice, literally walked out and closed the door. And that set is still there. The costumes are still there. The props are still there. And it really is still unknown whether, or not whether, but when that performance will be possible. So for us, there's a chance that come September, there's a chance that we'll open the season as the next season as planned, and wait to do Curse of the Starving Class, but do the season we had planned for next year. I think that's probably less percentage likely as far as when audiences will be able to gather in bigger numbers. And so we're also contemplating alternative seasons that change. The nice thing about what all four of us do is we do some really unusual work in terms of how audiences and the theater event interact with each other. All four of us play with that constantly. So we'll be looking at ways of, are there ways that an audience member can experience a show alone and at a distance, or in smaller groups? Is the idea of a promenade piece possible, where, I was thinking of the hotel plays, which I believe at some point, Fred, you enter into separate hotel rooms to experience the piece. So you're in alone or in a small group in a hotel room. And so, we're thinking about that as and we really won't know for a couple of months what the pace of social gathering is going to be come September. But right now we're just putting together plans. We're really lucky in Philadelphia specifically. The larger foundations have been really great at giving you 3 years of general operating money at a time. So that for a lot of companies, cash in the bank isn't as big of a deal. Now, you have to worry about running deficits in a given year. You're eating into money that is meant for future years, but to not have cash flow issues, which in the United States is a big deal. When you run out of cash, you run out of cash, and people get furloughed. And so for Dane and Katrina are able to stay on payroll. And because of that, we're in this really luxurious position of being able to go, okay, time and space for company, but 2 full-time employees, what feels important right now? And we didn't think about we really didn't want to just put up work because something needed to be put up during this time. We really just sort of took a breath for a couple of weeks and thought, what do we need to hear right now? And that's how this education series came. I thought that audiences needed to hear inside the art form, intellectually, politically, socially, artistically, just to give access inside, sort of behind the curtain of the art form in a way that we don't have time to give audiences just because of capacity when we're in full production. So that's what EgoPo's up to.
Wow.
Actually, go ahead, Ria.
No, I just like, wow, I know. It's just,
No,
I'm just thinking of, you have, those kind of run, and then you have a toast, and then that's it, and yeah. Just thinking about that situation.
Yeah, it's amazing. And really, it falls, to be clear, it falls harder on the individual artists who are on contract who watch those.
Yeah.
And
it's good to hear the position you're in. Position we're in is quite different because we have no revenue funding. We're purely project funded.
Yeah.
So if we're not doing a project, we don't have any income coming in. But I mean, like you say, it is a chance to reflect on what you're doing and to think about projects. We've gone on to thinking about doing 5 short R&D projects with people we've been talking to, which include international projects like with Livingston's Cabernet in Denmark. There's an Indian-Scottish connection on another project. There's a Romanian deaf dancer, actor that we've been talking to. But what we're looking to do is put in an application to get money to do 5 short R&D projects, which we'll do digitally. We'll rehearse over Zoom. We'll edit them, which is why I've been working on film edit programs. It's very interesting. Totally different media, though, having said that. And then hopefully, when the situation is better, we can take 1 or 2 or 3 of those projects and develop them into fully blown live performances and tour them. So yeah, that's the way we've gone. But yeah, it's good to have time to reflect as well.
Good. And yeah, let's keep we'll dive into that those sort of future artistic ideas. There's a question I want to ask that's appearing from Melanie, the awesome Melanie Stewart, which is for Ria, which is because you work in puppet theater, can you still go onto the street to create events for people in their homes? Like, does puppetry allow you to do something that non-puppet theater couldn't do?
Well, this is why we do this storyteller. We're not doing it on the street for this time, because we found that if we bring our puppets on the street, people will start to gather, and then, you know, we'll be surrounded by people. It's not physical distancing at all, because I think that's the power of puppets. Because, you know, as soon as you see this object alive, people were like, got hypnotized on it, and they don't care about Corona. So that is dangerous. So this is why we do it. We try to do it in a different version. Like, will be my very first time to do online puppet making workshops with our participants, and they actually bought a kit, and then but we will do the class like this, you know, through Zoom and everything like that. Yeah, and also housing here is not like housing in New York or Philadelphia or in Glasgow, which is like an apartment that you have lots of windows. Here you have yard, you have like big distance between other places, or even it's very, very close to each other. So yeah, I think for this time, we'll just keep the live performance as the thing that people will be really, really miss. So we'll just make sure that we you know, we grow that missing situation, like let them, okay, I really want to see this performance. As soon as this is gone, I will need to see these guys, you know, like, so that's actually what we've been trying to do.
So maintaining a kind of audience company thread, just so they can reestablish.
So we do several like making videos, but just with a very small, just only our very few people. So, and we post it in our Instagram, and then we put caption, try to put the positive energy on what happens on people's day life today, because there are plenty of, you know, like lots of friends becomes very stressful. They couldn't go out there. So I think one of our homework as an artist is spreading the positive energy. So we'll try that with these tools actually.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what art might look like in the initial phases coming out of quarantine. You know, all three of you, as I said, are really creative about how you conceive of a performance and what it means to be an audience at a performance. And in some ways, I'm getting a sense that the upcoming year may really lean aesthetically, artistically on small independent theater makers like ourselves more than on larger 400-seat theaters. And I mean, lean on us to really do R&D, to really figure out what kind of theatrical human interface can happen given the restrictions. So any initial thoughts about that, about ways that your work might look or forms that you might experiment with as social distancing just begins its early processes of opening up?
I think we are fortunate in that we work very much in a boutique style. So, you know, with our hotel plays, you have audiences in a hotel room, which is not ideal under these conditions, but like we play to 20 people per room. So I think we will look at I think what we've got to look at, first of all, is from the artist's point of view. And I think what is going to happen is we're going to see a decline in the power of the producer. And what we're looking at is a model where the actors have ownership of the play. So we might rehearse for no money, and then there's an equal split of box office. So the role of the producer paying salaries, and that, I think that is going to change, that whole balance on ownership by the artists of the work as opposed to being paid by a producer. I think if you look at that model and you have 20 people a night paying $100, and you got 4 actors on stage, they can go home with something in their pocket, which is more than they have now. So we are used to working in black box theater. We're used to working with puppets and masks to play all the auxiliary characters and things like that. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be, I think, quite easy for us to adapt, as I'm sure it is with Tia and with all the masks and the puppets. It's going to be quite easy. I mean, if we could do Richard III with 3 people. So it's going to be interesting. I think the biggest problem is going to be from the audiences and the venues, because in our country, post the apocalypse as it is now, are people going to have surplus income to go to the theatre? So we're going to have to look at pricing structures. We're going to have to look at pay what you can and all of those kind of structures. So it's going to be quite interesting from that. And then obviously also the question of venues. And I think this is where formal theatres are maybe going to fall by the wayside, because in South Africa, we have lots and lots of sunny weather. We have amphitheatres, we have loads of sports fields and venues like that. So I think we're going to, we have a big outdoor theatre in Cape Town that holds 900 people. So I think one is going to look at the performance space is going to change. I think we're going to enter sort of a Peter Brook mode, where we're going to find an old deserted warehouse where we can fit 50 people sitting comfortably apart on different levels and perform a beautiful piece of theatre with 4 actors, and taxing our creativity in terms of the way we create costumes and masks and things, because we're not going to be able to go to the prop shops and the costume shops and the set shops and have lavish things done. So it's going to be a very interesting thing. I come from an era in South Africa in which we called struggle theatre. I grew up at the space theatre because we had to play to segregated audiences. So black performers were not allowed to perform in front of white people. You weren't allowed to have mixed casts on stage. So the apartheid regime really kind of slammed down on that kind of theatre. So for instance, at the space theatre, one was used to finding ways to turn some secondhand clothing into kind of Edwardian costumes, or Jacobean, to cut the sleeves of me. So I kind of grew up in that poor theatre mode where we did a lot of subversive theatre to small audiences. So it's quite interesting. I'm finding there's a lot of doom and gloom around, but I'm finding it very interesting and very challenging, because we've never
I'd just like to say, Fred, if I can, I very much agree with you about, I think it's going to be the formal theatres, the more traditional theatres that are really going to struggle. And it's not, I think, just because of the numbers of audience, it's just that those theatres tend to have a slightly older demographic going there. And I wonder what that is going to be like coming out of this, but finally we do come out of it. If there's going to be more awareness of mortality from people who are more elderly, and if they're going to be thinking, well, it's happened once, it could happen again. Do I need to take the risk of going into a confined space with other people? I don't know. I think that's a worry. And I think also your point about people that are used to making work in non-theatrical settings, perhaps, should be, well, hopefully will survive better.
Yeah,
by using imagination.
I think that's great, Peter. I think there's two takeaways for me from that, Fred, which is one, that theatrical architecture is going to play a really significant role, and looking for alternative architectures that simply allow us to make work, I think is right on. And then 2, that all 4 of us have been scrappy theater makers before. We've figured out how to reach audiences without funding. And so in some ways it's less, it causes less paralysis, this situation, where for, a huge theater, the idea of working with 1/4 of the budget is like, it just freezes them up. And in us, in some ways, to just find the silver lining, I think probably all of us look back at earlier stages in our career sometimes with a little bit of romanticism of like, oh man, I should really create work like I did then when I rehearsed for 6 months straight. Or like that incredible set that we did for $100. And so in some ways it causes us to find that fuel that we had early in our art making careers. A couple questions I'm going to pick, or no, Ria, for you too. Do you think of structures that that might change as you come out of it?
through Papermoon's processes this time, I think most of the theater makers thinking that social media is a medium to publish or to promote their work. But I think through this kind of situation, there are lots of events starting to kind of like trying to adapt with the tools actually. And for us, from me myself, we found that lots of new experimental thing through this digital era, because theater, I can say it's a very traditional, right? Because we need to meet the other people. It's about being in the same place, in the same room, breathing the same air, and suddenly for now, someone from America, we are watching the same thing and we are talking to each other. So I found that this becomes also very interesting experiments for the medium of theater itself. And I found maybe after it's all finished, it's getting richer as well, because we found another form of spreading our works through this medium. So I found that this is also like, interesting thing to explore.
Absolutely. I was struck this week by, there's legendary theater companies and you hear about their shows, but there's no way to watch them. And suddenly here they are being broadcast. So I can go back and watch a Mabu Mines piece from 1975. And I'm like, this is magnificent. How did we not have this?
Like us in Indonesia could see Phantom of the Opera, like, where am I? Like, what is this? So I think it's opened lots of opportunities as well, if we would love to see it as an opportunities. So I think that is interesting.
I'm going to hit some we have Q&A starting to pop in, so I'm going to sort of bleed into Q&A. We'll bounce back out. An anonymous person asked, are you all considering that the new virtual initiatives that you're having to put in as permanent fixtures in your programming will stay in the future? Do you think any of this virtual work will remain? And what does that mean for your resources if it does?
I think it will remain to a degree. I mean, I think it was beginning before this happened anyway. There's a lot of work being made virtually. It's so different. It's such a different medium to work in. Personally, I'd love to see theatre regain its popularity, increase its popularity. And that live experience that you can't have through virtual broadcasts. It's, yeah, and this is great. This conversation it's lovely. It's not the same. It's not as exciting as, for instance, I suppose, sitting down in a theatre in front of a panel on stage and having that where you can see each other and you can interact, or somebody can get up and storm out if they want, or shout things, or that's basically good if you turned off the mute stuff.
It's interesting. I've been doing a lot of teaching on Zoom. The colleges here all continued, and so classes continued as scheduled on Zoom. And so I've been doing acting class, directing class, script analysis class. And it's interesting. The acting classes are it was a monologue based class anyway, and like we get actually some really deep focused work done. The work is very focused. After 1 hour, you're exhausted. You're spent in a way that it isn't live. And that's something about this medium of Zoom, it pulls energy out of you. You're just empty at the end of it, as opposed to a live situation in which there's a feedback loop of energy and you feel actually invigorated.
Yeah.
How are you, Kylie Westerbeck, who's actually working on our project with Ria and was in Curse of the Starving class, asks, how are you all staying motivated, inspired, and present about projects that you've had to postpone? Do you have any tricks for staying motivated with them? I know, Ria, you're sitting on probably 4 different projects postponed.
Well, because I have no way to turn around. This is what I found very interesting in this type of situation. We are coming back to the first question, why we are doing this, and why we are trying to be survive on this job or in this love that we share with this passion. So I think it's all coming back through that. Because we found that lots of people they're getting panic and they don't know what to do in front of them, because they just do what they're doing. They're not really having, you know, like a deep understanding of that, what they're doing. So I found that this is the right thing to question that, you know, like, yeah, this is the thing. I keep motivated because I'm pretty sure that we still have that lots of homework as human being, to live in this world. So yeah, and continuing this conversation, sharing with other friends, you know, like I like what you said, Lane, that this is the very first time for a human being who lives in the whole globe that we do have the same situation. You know, we do have climate change, but no one really taking, you know, really take it seriously, I assume, you know, because we still, you know, doing whatever. But with this situation, like everyone in South Africa, in Glasgow, in Philadelphia, in Jogja, everyone feel the same. And this is like, really we unite with that, you know. You're not, there is no news about wars. And this is what I found. Wow, after years, you know, you got hit by this micro thing that you couldn't see.
Yeah, and having gone through Hurricane Katrina, people keep asking me, like, what wisdom do I have from that? I'm like, oh, stay away from hurricanes. But
earthquake,
stay away from
yeah,
right?
And volcano.
And volcanoes, for sure. Is that to in some ways own the drama of it. To, you know, we're storytellers, and so for me, I let this quarantine become a little self-dramatized inside of myself. I'm living out a really dramatic story. It's different than Katrina. In Hurricane Katrina, you know, I got to tell lots of other people, oh my, this is my suffering. Here, everybody's going through their own suffering. So it's not a story you need to tell. And honestly, what my brain does is I think about how I'm going to describe it to my daughter when she's 30 and has a fuzzy memory of it. That it's really, it's an amazing, we're living through changing times. And sometimes changing times is positive and we're able to romanticize them, but sometimes changing times are rough. But we're living through a dramatic moment in the history of mankind. And to let that be exciting and to sort of be on the roller coaster day to day as an artist and live super presently, just figure out how just today, what do I need to do? And maybe what you need to do means lie on the couch for 12 hours and vegetate. And then the next day, look at now what is today.
I think that's a really interesting question you asked about what sort of theatre people are going to want to see when we emerge from this. Are they going to want to see stuff which reflects the time under lockdown and in coronavirus? Or is it going to be totally different? I mean, the project that we had in the pipeline, Boris Vian's The Empire Builders, I don't know who knows that, if any of you know it, but it's a 1950s German absurdist surreal work, which is about a family who are, for some mysterious reason, trapped in a room. At the end of each act, there's this noise comes and they need to move up a stair in this tenement block into a slightly smaller room, and that goes on over 3 acts, so they're going nearer and nearer to the top. They never acknowledge the noise. In the room, there is this character called a schmerz, which is this bandaged being that sits in the corner, that they never acknowledge other than going up and hitting and kicking and sticking things in it. It's a brilliant piece of theatre. It's very funny, as well as very prescient and very frightening. But then, you know, we're wondering, when we come out of this, is that going to be the sort of theatre that people are going to say, oh yeah, I think I'll go and see The Empire Builders. That sounds happy. Or are they going to want to go and see something like, I don't know, Spy Monkey would be the one that springs to mind in Britain, which is a very skillful, physical comic theatre company that aren't particularly trying to get over any particular message. They're about enjoyment. They're a very good company. Or, you know, do we go back to the eclectic mix? Hopefully we do, but it's all these questions that you're trying to work your mind around so you can plan for the future of what's going to work, what's going to earn you a livelihood as well has got to come into it.
Absolutely. So there's a real heartfelt sort of looking, and it sort of changes day by day of like, what do I need to communicate? What what do I need to sort of conjoin with my audience over? Like what? I always think about it as like having a dinner, a party with the audience, and like, okay, what do we need to serve at this dinner party? What makes sense to serve? What joins us together? For me personally, I'm in a place where like, oh, I want something really deep. I want an eyes closed, dark, internal journey piece. Like I don't need surface laughter. Like I need something that reflects my internal state right now. But I know other people really just will need color and laughter and joy. So the answer, I don't know if it's different for every artist or not.
Mm. I think it all depends. I think it all depends on when we come out of it as well, how long this goes on for, and how we come out of it. Because it's not going to be like the end of the Second World War, where the war finishes on a day, and then suddenly everybody's got this energy to go and make things like the birth of the Edinburgh Festival the year after the end of the Second World War. I think it's going to be a lot more of a progressive thing, like Fred said, that theatre doesn't appear in anywhere in South Africa's phase 1 to 5 plans. And it is going to be like a phase 0. It's going to be right at the end, and it's going to be slow. And how, you know, the longer that goes on, then the more perception, the more a different world we will live in. What is normal?
Thanks for that perspective.
I think one of the...
Sorry. Go, Brett. That's okay.
I think our level of communication is changing. I mean, I just take, for instance, the correspondence I have with the International Festival. It has always been, you know, can you send this? They send back a drawing. Is this okay? And it stays on that level. And since the lockdown, my correspondence with Denmark has deepened onto a personal level. And we end every email with kind of, well, we can't wait. We're going to sit and have a drink and kind of, how's your family? And so I think my feeling, I don't know, is that society, I mean, I'm corresponding with my sister over emails and WhatsApp on a level that I've never corresponded with her since we were teenagers. So it's I think society's ability to reflect and communicate is going to be very different. And I don't know if people are going to want to sit and watch a slapstick farce. Are people going to want to watch something which gives them a sort of a mini cathartic experience, and kind of, because we've all gone through, so we can sit and watch a play about some hugely traumatic incident and go, oh, well, I've never experienced that, but it's quite interesting. But I think every single human being on the planet is going through, like, am I going to get it? Am I going to die? Is my family okay? My society, my change, the lawlessness, people are looting, should I hoard? Should I shop? What about toilet? So I think we're all emotionally, which we do in theatre all the time when we analyze a character in a play. And I think society generally, our audiences are analyzing their feelings. And I think it's going to be a very different sensitivity in the auditorium in whatever form it takes from an audience. Well, certainly here in South Africa, I mean, people, you go, the drive in our country to address the question of the homeless people. At the moment, you drive your car and a homeless person comes, you look the other way. I think it's going to take a different thing, because we're now looking at our homeless people in a different light, because there are a very vulnerable community. So all those little things is going to play into a kind of it's going to be very interesting to perform a really heart-wrenching drama of a human situation in front of an audience in 2021. I think we're going to have a completely different reaction from the audience, again, specific to our countries and our communities.
Thanks, Fred. It sounds like in some part what you're saying is that our level of empathy is going to be hypersensitized.
Yeah.
Ria.
Yeah, I found that also what is changing is actually our physical contact. Because usually we just we meet our friends, we hug them, and then suddenly this time you have to, wow, okay, hi, I miss you, but I couldn't do this. That's also, there is a pressure in the physicality, And hug is something that, you know, like everyone loves it. You know, those kind of, you know, being welcome with those very physical situations. So I think it's just like, I don't know, but I'm just keep asking myself, if I go out and there is a theater production, what kind of performance I would love to see. It's not like putting us as a creator, what I would love to make. Also, that is important. But then also, for me, if I'm an audience, what kind of production I would love to see after I can go and see that. I think just being surrounded by friends and seeing another people for the first time in the first place, you know, like they're, wow, we are here again, we survived, guys, you know, or, you know, checking out each other. It will be very, yeah, it's just something's very different, I think.
We'll have to make intervals longer.
Yes.
That's right. I have a question from An, which is, I think this is from Indonesia. Is it possible to make a show involving a network of EgoPo Classic Theaters as part of a social movement for fundraising in Indonesia? Because our government is in the process of collecting data, while artists or performers need space to survive now. I hope Mrs. Ria can realize this movement in Indonesia.
Wow. Well, I found that, like what just Lane said, this time in the whole world, everyone feel the same. You know, it's very hard. Like I experienced the big earthquake in 2006 in Jogja, which is like, I think 3,000 or 1,000 people like just gone. And then all the buildings are flat, crazy. So in that time, we can definitely asking for help to other people around the world, you know, like having a connection with our friends there. But this time, my gosh, it happens everywhere. So having a crisis here, also having crisis in other part of the world. So I think this is what I found very interesting with this type of condition. Of course, it could go for a communal, you know, like helping each other and everything. But then it really goes to it's a networking as well, you know, like those kind of, okay, I would love to support this company, I can help doing this, rather than, you know, gather a huge gigantic fundraising for one country, because everyone needs help for this time. So yeah, I think helping the one who's closest to you first, it's important.
Thank you, Ria. Last question, then we'll go to live Q&A. And when we go to live Q&A, guys, you use your hand raise function if you're willing to go to audio. And if you don't want to go to audio, then you can use the Q&A function. So the last question is how this affects internationalism in theater. Do you have any sense in your gut about, I don't know, the role that internationalism might play in your work in theater in general? What role was it playing? Does COVID-19 change that role as we progressively come out of this situation? Like, you know, why do international collaboration, Ria?
Well, I found that because since the beginning when I found Papermoon, I think it's quite different with another, you know, countries that, you know, we're speaking here, because in Indonesia, we don't have a good structure for arts, I can say, in all situations. We don't have grants to go to perform in a big theater. Even black box in the whole country, we only have maybe 3. So, you know, in 17,000 islands. So can you imagine that artists here are, you know, it's basically really what you do is what you do. So it's not, you're not thinking about grant from the government. That's not, at least that's not for Papermoon for this time. Well, we try to do our best by build our connection and network. So from the beginning, I started Papermoon. I already think about, I'm not only Indonesian citizen. I'm the citizen of the world. I'm the global citizen. So that's why we are very aware of like having a connection, maintaining networking, try to find new friends. It's basically since the beginning, we aware that we are part of this one big earth. And, you know, even you need visa to go to one places and ticket flight or everything, but we're still the similar human being with the same meat and blood. So we try to put that in that position rather than having, oh yeah, Indonesia very far away. And no, we are the same. So since the beginning, we are having that kind of awareness. So that's why lots of our works and conversation happen with lots of friends from different countries, in many different countries. So especially we also initiated this International Biennale Puppet Festival every 2 years. And last year we had 75 artists from 16 countries joining. So we found that within this time, the series of talk that I've told you before, since the 1st of April till the 18th of April, I initiated this speak and interview with puppetry artists around the world. I found that this is it, you know, when you kind of like, this is a big community. Artists we are small actually, you know, compared to this, whatever, mine, coal, business, plastic factory, whatever. Art is quite small as well. We don't have really good infrastructure, I know, but, you know, maintaining other, you know, the relationship in between people, I think that is our first point, basically, in that situation.
It's beautiful.
And how does this give an effect to our internationalism? Is that the word that you just asked? It doesn't change. It made me really becomes the part of it. Like, you know, I'm so glad that Lane, you're asking me, how are you, Ria? Let's do this. This is it, you know, like, even puppetry art is very teeny tiny. I mean, the contemporary art is very small in Indonesia. Then I know that I have friends in another part of the world that, you know, doing crazy things as same as mine, for example. So it's the thing also to survive.
Thank you for that. I mean, it really sounds that in many ways, this situation is making us more aware of and care more about internationalism, because our experiences are incredibly aligned. But you were already on that path. In some ways, the challenges of just making and producing theater in Indonesia made that path a more natural path for you from the very beginning. It's interesting.
We similar to Rio, we don't have formal structures from government, and, you know, I mean, in certain countries, grant writing has become an art form. You know, we don't have that. So again, we rely on, if there's no festival or no body to co-produce with, we don't work. So internationalism has been quite important for us. I think it's also becoming part of that global community, and all of the things that you said apply. But I think the other thing that really is possibly the most rewarding, and I speak from a personal point as a director, is to see other people's work outside your country and to get feedback. And I mean, when we go to festivals, yes, we do 5 performances or whatever, but we also get to see a hell of a lot of other countries' work. And it's so useful for you, because you kind of, without sounding arrogant, in my country, I'm kind of in the top bracket of theatre directors. But when I suddenly am exposed to international work, and I can kind of, from an artist, I can see where my work fits in, and like, hey, we're not that bad, or like, hey, you know, this is, and I think that personal growth, when we come back on the plane with the artist, we're so busy sharing more about the experiences and people we met and other plays and productions that we saw, more than, oh, didn't we do great? And you know, I think that growth as an artist, that's where internationalism is vital, because, you know, I'm intrigued now to meet you and see the influences on your puppetry and your mask work, because that's where we work. I would never have met you had it not been for COVID-19. I've seen Lane's house and his collection of masks and things that he's brought back, and I've kind of heard about the collaboration. But now, again, there's a connection. So I think it's the growth for us as artists, as artistic directors, and for actors. I think that it's vital. It's such a, as you say, we're not a village. We're actually part of a global family. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think that I've always found it very rewarding and such a learning experience working in different cultures. I mean, that's going back to working in Poland when it was just at the end of the communist era. I did a number of projects there, and it was incredibly informative and culturally inspiring. Projects I've done in the States, projects I've done in Europe, enormous enjoyment from them. I mean, in terms of, when you were talking about festivals, Fred, there's one thing that's interesting that's going on in Scotland, because with the Edinburgh Festival, which, I mean, I'm sure it will survive, and I'm sure the Fringe will survive. It'll be more difficult for a number of reasons, but it's an amazing opportunity when you live here to see work from other countries. It's fantastic. But then in Britain at the moment, we've got the prospect of coming out of coronavirus and walking straight into Brexit, and how that's all going to play in terms of internationalism. It's just like, you know, and the other thing I would say is that probably the only good thing that's come out of this is the lack of environmental pollution, noise pollution, air pollution. And I think that people are going to kind of look back and say, yeah, well, look at that. We did it. All this talk about climate change, nobody did anything. Along comes a virus, and suddenly, you know, all these nasty things have gone out the air, and you can hear birds singing. And then it comes down to things like air travel. I mean, touring of any nature is not a cheap thing to do environmentally. Internationally, you know, you've got all these pollutants. I don't know the answer to any of these. These are just things that I've been thinking about and how it might impact on us.
I mean, you three are really, I just want to point out that it's the work that you three have been doing since well before this situation has really always been a great inspiration for me. I mean, all three of you really have thought about your work as global citizens, to me, seeming from the get-go, and it's really beautiful. And I just want to say that your work is thus going to be so important right now as we come out of this. So just thank you for thinking of yourself as a global artist, and really, I know it can feel so isolated when we're small independent companies, but I can just speak for myself that, you know, I've always paid attention what the three of you do, and it's really inspiring to try to always be thinking at that global level.
I think just to pick up on what Peter was saying, just on a personal level, how much money we spend going shopping. Now you sit at home and go, oh, we need, do I really want to put on a mask and the gloves and do the whole, you know, I can do without it. So it's kind of shopping every couple of weeks and really buying essentials. So I think the whole way we spend, I think the whole concept of money is going to be different. You know, I think the way we spend just in our personal lives. And I think it's not just, oh, we're a little community and we've been hit by a virus. I think the world is looking at those things, how we spend, what we do with our leisure. And the amount of people who never ever go to theater, who are watching stuff online, watching ballets and operas and theater from across the globe because it's free. I've got nothing to do. I'm stuck at home. I'm tired of Netflix and Hollywood. So I'm going to watch a Polish East European movie, you know, and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, it sounds weird, but I'm quite excited. I'm feeling quite, it's going to be different. I'm not feeling doom and gloom at all. Yes, we're going to suffer financially. We're going to have to change the way we spend and shop and live. In our country, our city has dropped rates and taxes for a few months on our properties. Banks have cut all bank charges. So if you've got an ATM, our entire government, including the president, all taken a drop of 1/3 of their salaries, which is going into the relief fund. So the whole concept of offering somebody work and what are you going to pay them, it's going to be a balance between a financial reward, but what am I going to get on the other end and to enrich me? I think it's exciting.
Thank you, Fred, for that positive, upbeat note. Let's get into about 10 or 12 minutes of Q&A. Guys, just raise your hand. Use the raise the hand function. And while that's happening, I'll do a combined question from Nick and Matt B over in Facebook land, which is, What's the distinction when you're doing theater via these virtual forums? What's the distinction between this and sort of streaming that has streaming video film that's always happened? How is theater different than video when you're doing it over a video medium? And Nick asked, and are you aware of any new technologies that you want to share separate from Zoom to work and collaborate online?
Well, I found that this is very interesting. What was the differences? Because in Papermoon's performances, every time we finish our show, we always invited audience to come on stage to see all of the, you know, everything. You can ask question to the performer. You can ask the question to the director directly. And then, of course, we, you know, with virtual, you just see people come, take a look for a few seconds and go. But in theater, you know, you have to get into the theater, sit there, doing this ritual from even when before you go to the theater, like choosing your clothes, taking a bath, putting a perfume. So yeah, well, suddenly you just can watch theater as you want. You know, you can just click it. I don't like it. I just leave it. It is different. So like you said, Lane, about the energy that it keep bouncing through the audience and the performer, you couldn't get it through these flat things. So it is we're still exploring the medium, actually, how to make it not like a film, for example, how to still give it as a performance, as you can still feel this tension, you know, of physicality. But of course it's hard because it's a screen. But yeah, I think that is the challenging part for me.
I'd say the major difference is that we're so used to watching screens and the image is changing all the time. It's so different in that sense. And as soon as you start putting theatre onto a video format, I'd like, you know, just I find myself doing it if I'm editing, just changing it, the focus very quickly. Whereas in theatre, you can leave the focus a lot longer. It's a different pace, different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
My student directors have quickly become adept at directing on Zoom. We literally every week they're putting up their, you know, they create pieces on Zoom and then record them and show them to the directing class. And you're right. The big thing is there's no editing, so it's a continuity of time on the video screen. And then it's neat. It's different. It does something different than traditional highly edited video does. Yeah, it does become. We have to find. What I like is the directors are having to be much more minimal in their choice making. There has to be much fewer directorial choices per 30 seconds in some ways than there might when doing it live. And I think it's been an interesting skill. I don't want to continue it for months, but it's interesting. Any hand raises? Anybody like to ask a question live? Is there any, and would any of the three of you, do you have a question for the rest of us that you want to hear an answer to? Go ahead, Fred. There was something on your lips.
No, there's somebody asked me about a question here in the questions about because we wear masks in performance, how it would feel performing to an audience in masks. It'd be quite interesting. I mean, if you think I'm trying to think of the group that does the Scottish play in New York, where the whole audience is in masks and you promenade through that building. Sleep No More.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, you know, they only allow certain like 10 of you into a space at a time and stuff like that. So I think those kind of, it was very interesting for me to go through that Sleep No More experience, being an audience member in a mask. But yeah, I think it might be interesting. You know, it's kind of, when you perform in foreign countries and they have surtitles, as an actor, you kind of doing your thing and you're aware that the whole audience is kind of every now and then looking above you. Anybody with spectacles in the audience, you just see this glint as they're looking at the text. We did a performance of a Shakespeare once, and the first few rows were a whole lot of learners who were hearing impaired, and on the end of each row was somebody signing. And at interval, I had to go back to the cast and go, guys, keep the pace, because they were kind of saying a line, then watching the interpreter doing it, and then carrying on. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting in how we engage the audience and playing to a group of people in masks, or in, you know, every third space is occupied and there's these empty spaces between people. I think it's going to be very exciting. Certainly in the days when, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Lane Savadove is ill, so he won't be on stage tonight, so we have to cancel. We'll just go, well, he's got his cell phone, so if you watch the screen on the right, Lane will just kind of stream his performance in. You know, it's going to be incredibly interesting how we do things. What we're going to do, I'm not sure yet, but it's all swimming around there.
I'm really interested in the fact that drive-in movie theaters in the United States are suddenly having a comeback. And I'm like, oh, that idea that you're private with your family. You have this enclosed space where you can have your own rituals while you're collectively at a performance event. That's super interesting. I haven't figured out how to apply it to live theater yet.
They're doing it with live religious ceremonies. I think it was in India, India or Pakistan, they had a big drive-in, which, yeah, and then you think about it, but how many times can you do that?
Right.
I mean, you can do it as a very neat one-off piece, you know, but, you know, it's another drive-in piece of theater.
Question from Liz. Do you have any dream outcome of what we as a theater community and creators might take away from this, might learn from this? I mean, one is to talk to each other live, to make the space. It's crazy. Ria and I would need to, we spent 2 months scheduling to have a video phone call, 6 months ago. A video phone call was the biggest deal in the entire world. And now we're like, hey, you want to be on this panel? Great, yes. And it happens. So weirdly, making the time for personal connections, but via video. That's really one takeaway. What else?
I think that what I'd like to see happen, it's not just about theatre, but the world somehow basically gets reconfigured, and that we get away from a situation where a very small percentage of people own a very large percentage of the wealth, and that community starts to be valued more than self-interest, and that leads equally to a reappraisal of the importance of the arts within our society. That's what I would love to see happen, but yeah, we'll see. Big dream.
In terms of, go into a little bit more detail for us, in terms of what? In terms of audiences, in terms of content of the theater pieces, in terms of the artists?
No, it's more, I'm talking more in terms of society overall. And I think a reappraisal along those lines would lead to a greater appreciation of the arts, people being more involved in the art. Not in necessarily one art form or another art form, but it would hopefully ignite people's imaginations. It's not very well thought through, Lane. It's just
no, but it's nice. But there is something much more radical, an opportunity that's much more radical that's going on right now about an equitable, radically democratic society. Not somehow, it's pretty clear. I mean, this virus has allowed us to see the inequities in an absolutely clear way that not the whole world could see before. In the end, there's certain people who need to keep doing essential jobs and whose lives are more at risk because of economics. It's right in front of our faces.
If you take the football, or what we call soccer, that these people play in those enormous stadiums, those soccer stars get paid millions compared to an actor or somebody sitting behind a desk. That whole thing has collapsed. It's going to be a long time before we see 80,000 people in a stadium, because they can play the game, they can still win or lose, and it can be televised. We can sit at home and watch the game. you don't actually, yeah, there's a percentage of people that you need to be live at the baseball game or at the football match and support your team. But the inequity or the inequality of the payment that those superstars receive compared to what people in the arts receive. So it's going to be very interesting. Are people going to go, well, I'll watch the game on TV, but there's this really cool sort of interactive theater thing happening, and it's like 80
Can I just say, I totally agree with you about the inequity. I love football. I miss football a lot, actually. And I would just say that there is an enormous difference between being live at a game and watching it on television. I mean, Brecht used to write about, football and theatre being very akin in terms of experiences. And I totally agree with him. But I also, it has exposed the ridiculous sums of money that top professional footballers are paid. It's extraordinary. I mean, we've known it for a long time, but now in this situation, it just seems obscene.
Yeah.
Interesting thought. I have a question from Shannon Harkins, who says, in terms of teaching and the level of education of your students would be getting in the studio live, how close do you feel learning virtually can get to being in the room together? And is this sustainable? I mean, I'm doing it hours a day. I think for a short stretch of time, we are making do, and it is okay. I think my acting students are progressing. I think my directing students have learned a great deal. Script analysis has been going totally fine. And honestly, we're able to do a kind of interactivity. I have 35 kids on my Zoom conference at the same time for script analysis. And we're able to have a decent level of discourse, honestly. In some ways, I have a better personal connection with them in this virtual space, a large class of, say, 35, than I do in a full classroom where people can disappear a little bit easier. Here I can see them disappearing. But do I think it's sustainable? I don't, not for theater education. Now, somebody different than me may have greater ideas about it, and it certainly depends about what area of theater education we can do. But like, oh man, if I have to in the fall teach my movement class, I can't. I don't ethically think I can teach movement. It's one thing to go get through a month and get to the end of the semester and get everybody credit for their course, but to go in knowing it's going to happen, a course like movement I couldn't ethically teach. I just don't think that's worth the price of tuition, what I would do. Theater management, totally. Theater management could be virtual anyway. I love a live classroom and I want to come back to it, but the acting and directing, voice, movement, I don't think it's really long-term sustainable in this format. I don't know if you guys have thoughts about it.
I agree. I agree with you.
I think, for instance, in terms of rehearsing, I think the concept of being able to do table read and analysis and everything weeks before rehearsals, and even a couple of Zoom rehearsals and running the text and that, I think one's going to be able to hit the rehearsal room running far more than the traditional thing that you spend the first couple of days sitting around analyzing, looking at it. I think it's going to truncate our rehearsal times, and we can get a lot of prep done, and a lot of the teaching and stuff like that, and the modules, we can cover a lot of ground, answer questions, so that when we get to the classroom or we get to the rehearsal space, we can get moving, because as Lane said, you've had that personal contact with every single person, being able to say, like, why are you frowning like that? What's your question?
And I would think, Fred, that because you also have international cast, that it's really going to facilitate that 3 months out, you could get together your 2 actors in Massachusetts with your 4 actors in South Africa, do a week of table work or 4 days of table work, and have creative juices flowing months before you step into the room together, which you logistically couldn't do, period. Beforehand. So that is really interesting in terms of international work.
Yeah.
So Rhea and I would always go, oh, we're gonna put this creative work on hold. I'll see you in 6 months when I next take a 30-hour flight to see you. And the fact is that we could be doing collaborative work in this format.
Yeah.
I have one hand raised, and this might be our last question. It's Katrina. So Katrina, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. So my question, you may not be able to answer this. This is just something that I've been thinking about because I was so struck. And sorry, you can hear my toddler in the background. My apologies. But I was so struck by the very few times I've had to leave my house and put on my mask. And it's just such a very different world where I've been secluded in my home for the majority of this social distancing, taking care of my daughter. And it made me appreciate sensory connection and sensory interaction and the moment where we're going to be able to hopefully take off the mask and interact with one another. And so I'm curious if any of you can speak to how the senses and just the physical engagement, touch, I don't know, is going to change the nature of your work, that we will come out of this with a deeper appreciation of the able to interact with one another as humans, and if that will be a part of the way that you move into creating and re-engaging with your work. I don't know.
I think the amount of, this sounds bizarre, but the amount of kind of, really kind of minimal shopping for key ingredients and cooking and baking and the sharing of food and stuff, and how suddenly everybody is cooking because you've got nothing else to do once you've done your online chores and your routine. The whole making of dinner becomes a ritual. So I think if one thinks about theatre and ritual and where it originated out of kind of religious spaces and temples, I think a key to look at is, as Lane was saying, is like, is it about sharing a meal? Is it about dinner theatre? There's so many rituals. People are suddenly, I'm trapped with my kids at home, so they're getting art supplies and painting with the kids. People are printing, people are home dyeing fabrics, they're just doing things. So I think the sensitivities around that is we're going to be able to create, I think it's increasing certain senses in people in terms of smell, taste, touch, and things. I don't know how many people are going to rush out and hit a McDonald's after lockdown, because I've been making my own burgers at home. I've learned to bake bread. So when you walk past that little bakery that makes really nice homemade bread and stuff, I think our senses are going to change. And I think it's definitely going to be something very interesting to do with an audience.
Yeah, it's why I feel like work should be quiet and delicate. We should be careful about how we direct our energies.
Yeah. How do we use sound in theatre? Do we have pumping music? Oh, we must create a mood, so we must have ambient music playing. Sometimes in the foyers, theatres have stuff going on. And no, maybe it's about coming into a space and there's artwork and there's exhibitions of the designs and there's talkbacks afterwards and things, and then it becomes a kind of a space of sanctity again, as opposed to rushing in, grabbing a drink, sitting down. What am I seeing? Oh, okay, yeah, it's this. I think the whole ritual of going to the theatre or to a live, I want to kind of get away from calling it theatre. It's sort of a live performance is going to be something different. People are going to want to go and picnic and listen to a symphony concert under the stars, rather than going to a concert hall and sitting with 800 people, and of which 200 cough every now and then.
Hey,
yeah,
so I was going to say last thoughts.
Oh yeah, sorry. But I found that this is also interesting, that what will a piece will look like after a long kind of like hibernation of the artist as well. It's not just only about the audiences, but also the artists that have been doing this at home. I do lots of creation with my son, my 5-year-old son at home, and it becomes like, wow, it's really mind-blowing. So it's another different way of artistic journey, basically, and which we do it more in our daily life. So I think it's also, of course, yeah, I don't know what will be happen after this. So yeah, we'll see.
Last thoughts, Peter?
I kind of look forward to seeing what the new normal is. I think it's going to take a long time before we find out, and before we're in a position to be back to really working together. I mean, the question about tactile engagement, I mean, I'm sure, you know, that a lot of my work involves physical contact. It would be great to be back in a space where you can do exercises like that and work with people directly face to face. I really look forward to it. But I don't know when it's going to come. I've got a feeling it's going to be next year rather than this. Hopefully not.
Well, thank you guys. We'll end on that down note. Thank you, Peter.
I'm sorry.
It's great. It'll give us more time to hibernate, become more empathetic,
yes,
and raise our sensory awareness even more. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. It fills my heart for us to gather across the globe like this. I appreciate it. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Lane. Great forum. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it.
Looking forward for the next one.
And we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Yes.
Guys.
Bye. Bye.